Alternatively, there may be uncertainties of various kinds, where you have lumpiness of investment, where you have long gestation periods. In all such cases, it becomes essential for the state to step in. In fact, this was the fundamental reason why in the immediate post-decolonization period, not only in India, but in a large number of other third world countries, the state played a leading role in fact setting up a whole range of industries which otherwise would not have come up at all. In fact, it was a part of the essential political component of economic decolonization that the state had to step in order to ensure, if you like, a kind of economic independence that came through self-reliance, which would not otherwise have been achieved because of the uncertainties in private rates of return, as far as private enterprise is concerned, in entering areas where it had little expertise, where it had little confidence, areas which were dominated by foreign capital. Finally, of course, there is the whole case that we know that a capitalist economy is typically subject to problems of deficiency of aggregate demand, for which the state has to step in, and the state does step in. Such stepping in typically takes the form of fiscal intervention, but fiscal intervention is often ideally carried out through public enterprises. Often it's carried out through an expansion of the public sector that even remains invisible. For instance, these days in India, there's a significant expansion of the NREGS, National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. But it is often not recognized that the spread of NREGS is also an implicit spread of state sector in the functioning of the economy, admittedly the lowest tier of the state, that is the panchayats. So quite often public expenditure is actually best undertaken through the medium of a public agency, and that public agency entails an expansion of the public sector. Now, to see the role of the public sector as a bulwark against monopolies, private or foreign, to see the role of the public sector as a necessary means of generating a certain level and a certain composition of social output, essentially implies that the public sector cannot be a clone of the private sector. If the public sector operated exactly the way that private monopolies operate, then of course the public sector would not be a bulwark against them. Pretty soon you would have collusions between the public monopolies and the private monopolies, so that the fundamental social role of the public sector will get undermined. As a result, it is necessary in the role of the public sector in a democratic polity that the public sector must have characteristics different from the private sector. One such characteristic must be that the public sector does not go in for amassing as large an amount of profits as the private sector does, because then you don't have a countervailing role. In India, paradoxically, the public sector has been judged precisely on the grounds that it is not as profitable as the private sector. But the whole purpose of public sector intervention is to function as a bulwark against monopolies, and therefore to have characteristics that must necessarily be different from the private sector. In fact, it's precisely this difference in characteristics which are held against the public sector and used as an argument against the public sector, which is an illicit argument. Of course, to say this does not mean that the public sector should not make profits. It must make profits to the extent that by doing so, its social role is not being undermined. To the extent that by doing so, its functioning in a democratic polity as a means of defending the people's democratic rights is not undermined. To the extent it's not undermined, if the public sector is not making profits, then of course there is something wrong with that. Therefore, as far as the public sector is concerned, the idea is not to make profits by hook or by crook, not by any means, but on the other hand to do so while at the same time remaining loyal to the social role enjoined upon the public sector in a democratic polity. Now, what is remarkable about the Kerala experience is that in Kerala, the revival of the public sector, or as the phrase goes, the turning around of the public sector, has occurred not because the public sector has suddenly become a land grabber or a land speculator and thereby made speculative gains on scarce land and thereby shown a certain profit on its books. It has not occurred through financial manipulations or financial jugglery. It has not occurred through massive retrenchments of workers. It has occurred through streamlining of public sector operations. It has occurred through better management, it has occurred through better training, it has occurred through a more careful management of public sector enterprises without, in other words, compromising the essential social role of public sector enterprises. So the Kerala experience therefore raises a very deep question. When the public sector is not functioning well, and when this not functioning well, or a dip in its profits, is not accountable by its social role. In other words, dip in profits is something which is quite independent, which is not enjoined upon it by the social role it plays, then there must be, in the running of the public sector, some lacunae reflecting the absence of a political will to run the public sector. If you like, in Kerala, what has happened in the last 3 years is that the political will to revive the public sector as a public sector, has been there. And what the Kerala experience clearly shows that since the public sector can be revived if there is a political will to revive it, its role in the democratic polity, its role as an agency for building a humane society, and the argument for that role remains intact. With these words, it's my pleasure to inaugurate this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, sir, for that wonderful inaugural address. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the privilege of inviting Professor P.J. Kurian, Member of Parliament, former Minister of State, Industrial Development, Government of India, to kindly address the distinguished audience.
Honorable Kadambaram Karim, Minister for Industries and Commerce, Professor Prabhat Patnaik, Vice Chairman, State Planning Board, Kerala, Sri John Mathai, Chairman, Riyadh, Kerala, Sri Muhammad Amin, General Secretary, State U, Sri Balakrishnan, IAS, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I came to this seminar to listen to and learn, not to give a lecture. But I have been asked to say a few words. And I am doing it without any hesitation. First of all, I use this opportunity to congratulate Honorable Minister Kadambaram Karim and his team for what they have done, which, according to Kerala standard, was found to be impossible. See, Professor Prabhat Patnaik has said one thing. If there is a political will, public sector units can be turned around. And I have no hesitation in profusely thanking you for bringing that political will into the industrial climate of Kerala. I thank you very much. Also John Mathai, Sri Balakrishnan and all others. But however Sri John Mathai or Balakrishnan or any bureaucrat tries, if the political leadership is not willing to listen to the advice of the bureaucrat, the experts, then nothing will work. And you have done that. My congratulations once again. Now, see, with regards to Kerala, everybody says the development indicators are comparable with that of Europe. But the paradox is that industrially we are backward, even today backward. What is the reason? I think many sociologists are trying to find out the reason behind it. When I came to Delhi, many people used to ask me in those days, how is that Kerala is work hard outside Kerala and not within Kerala? I have yet to find out an answer for that. There may be varying perception. Anyhow, to some extent it is a fact that outside Kerala, all Keralites, whether in Delhi or outside India, they do very well. They perform very well. That means Keralites can do, they can perform, they can produce results. But something is lacking in Kerala which prohibits, which prevents them from showing the real capability of the Keralites. It is for the political leadership of various spectrum, whether it is the left side or the right-wing people, to come together and find out an answer for this. I am sure Sri Alavaram Karim can take an initiative in that, since you are doing something good here. See, it is true, most of the public sector units in Kerala was sick, underperforming, maybe not close because Kerala people will not allow. The Kerala trade unionism is very strong. They will not allow to close an industry. So they will live in oxygen. Many other industries will live on oxygen. But this giving oxygen is very costly. Where is this oxygen coming from? From the exchequer. That is poor man's, common man's tax. That is not the solution. Surviving, allowing them survive on oxygen by pumping money from the exchequer is not the solution at all. Therefore, the solution is either you make it perform, turn around, or you allow it to die. See, when the industrial, this is an era of liberalization. Many people misunderstand about liberalization and criticize, saying that liberalization means privatization. Not at all. In liberalization, I was a minister when the industrial reforms was introduced. I am the one who introduced the reforms in the parliament. I only did it. The intention was not privatized. The intention was, number one, if a public sector unit can be turned over, can be made functional, then it should be done. All efforts should be done to make a public sector unit functional and profitable and productive.